One Detroit heads to Mackinac Island for the Detroit Regional Chamber's Mackinac Policy Conference. Where Michigan stands now, attracting business and talent. What about fixing the roads and schools? We'll have the interviews and analysis from decision makers from around the state. I'm Christy McDonald. Join me along with Stephen Henderson and Nolan Finley. One Detroit from Mackinac Island is coming up.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, Craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. How does diversity bring energy to us all? At DTE Energy, we believe that it's the contributions of all that build great communities. As a company, we grow stronger by welcoming the unique perspectives of everyone. As community members, we support our state's broad culture and heritage. From working closely with women and minority-owned suppliers to embracing our local cultures, DTE Energy is powering diversity. The DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public Television.
Support is also provided by the Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV, Business Leaders for Michigan, ITC Holdings, LLC, Michigan Technological University, W.K. Kellogg Foundation, and viewers like you. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome to One Detroit from the Grand Hotel. I'm Christy McDonald. For the next 3 days, we'll be reporting from northern Michigan, where each year the state's political, business, and education leaders gather to talk about the next steps for Michigan. This year's policy conference is focusing on uniting the state, and coming up, Nolan Finley and Stephen Henderson will join me. We will talk about what's on the agenda here on the island and the topics that are dominating the conversations. Plus, Governor Gretchen Whitmer makes her debut at the conference as the state's top leader. Also, I'll talk with Detroit Public Schools Community District Superintendent Nikolai Vitti about student improvement. And the guys from Under the Radar, Michigan are here with a piece of the Grand Hotel's history. We have a lot to get to. But first, there's a lot to talk about here at the conference, especially in the areas of education, infrastructure, workforce training, and economic development. Here's a little perspective on where we stand in Michigan right now. In 2019, Michigan finds itself with a new governor and new leadership in Lansing, already at odds over the big issues like auto insurance, the budget, and fixing the roads.
Our leaders have failed us. They have pretended that we could get by, or we could get by on small fixes. And now we've got a crisis on our hands, a crisis that we're all paying for already.
Governor Gretchen Whitmer ran on a Fix the Damn Roads platform and is pushing for a gas tax to raise the over $2 billion needed to get Michigan's infrastructure back up to par. But it's a tax the Republican-led House and Senate don't seem to want to buy into. There are also stark differences on how much to spend on K-12 education. The state now has a new superintendent, and schools are getting ready to implement the third grade reading law, which calls for kids to be held back if they're not reading at grade level. Given that only half of Michigan's third graders were proficient or advanced on state tests last year, retention of large numbers of kids is a real concern. There is also focus on Detroit schools, 2 years on the job for Superintendent Nikolai Vitti.
I think at the end of this year, we're going to see improvement with the percentage of students that are performing at or above grade level.
Education is emerging as a key factor in training Michigan's workforce for the future, as well as attracting businesses with high-level jobs and salaries that go with them.
There is a growing optimism around the trajectory of Michigan, and there's a lot to be optimistic about. And we see that in business investment, we see that in the success of our nonprofit institutions across the state. We see it a lot around kind of next generation mobility, we see it around technology. So we see a lot of positive things that are happening.
CEOs across the state are still looking for talent, and there is a concerted push to bring more people to the state and retain those new college grads.
We just have a stagnant population. So in our view, we think one of the biggest things we've got to focus on is population growth. And until we really get that going, it's going to continue to be a talent shortage here in our state.
The biggest city in the state, Detroit, continues to tout downtown growth. Major investment from FCA and Waymo announced this year. More hotel openings, housing options, but the push for neighborhood investment intensifies. Mayor Mike Duggan is putting focus and resource in certain neighborhoods, like here in Fitzgerald, for housing and stability. But still areas struggle with blighted properties and crime.
This house that's all, look, like you could almost blow it down.
In the city and around the state, environmental concerns, clean water, PFAS contamination are issues for not only local municipalities, but being fought at the national level by Michigan's congressional delegation. And speaking of politics, the 2020 election isn't that far away. Presidential candidates are already eyeing Michigan as a big-time battleground state. All right, so it wouldn't be a Mackinac Policy Conference without meeting up with Nolan Finley and Stephen Henderson. Hey,
on
guys.
the porch, no
We're
less.
on the porch, and the porch is where a lot of stuff actually gets done. So if you look over my right shoulder, maybe you can see Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, who's actually having a conversation.
Doing something important.
But this is really what Mackinac and the Policy Conference is all about. You get all of these people in one place, and there are a lot of items on the agenda, Nolan. I mean, people are talking about roads and a couple of other things.
A lot of people talking about Dan Gilbert. What happens if Dan Gilbert is not able to fully recover and resume his place as both the leader of his company, but as a leader of Detroit's comeback? And that is on the minds of a lot of people, and I've heard no end of conversation and speculation about that. I think it's the really big deal this year.
Yeah,
Because he pushes a lot of agendas, and he also picks up pet projects as well and advances those causes.
And again, if you go back to before Dan Gilbert in downtown Detroit, there's just no comparison in what city you are in. I mean, you might as well be on a different planet if you go back to 2009 in downtown Detroit. And I have always been someone who fretted about the reliance on one person to do all of the things that he's done. And I think eventually we will have to make sure that there's a more diversified portfolio of investment in the city. But at this point, this is about one person's vision for a pretty desolate place to be very much more vibrant. And he pulled that off. And I think you can't help but wonder if that person weren't involved or is not going to be involved in the future, how do you sustain all of that?
Yeah, and it's an unfinished agenda. We've got the Hudson skyscraper that's still supposed to start this summer. Monroe Block, a lot of things that he still had planned. And you know, he's been a unique character, not just in Detroit, but I think among American cities, in that he had the resources and the freedom. He doesn't answer to anybody but himself. His mortgage company generates a lot of money. He's used that money to make investments that other people perhaps wouldn't have made or wouldn't have made so many of. And that's accelerated Detroit's comeback.
Yeah, a lot of workers downtown, too. Another thing people are talking about is the role of Governor Whitmer here at the conference. And she kicked off the conference and talking about some of the things that she'd like to see done, namely roads and education. Let's go ahead and take a look at what she had to say.
I am really looking forward to this conference and the conversation that we are going to have over the course of the next couple of days. And so I simply want to start by thanking the Detroit Regional Chamber and Sandy and Patty and all of the people that put so much work into making this conference a success. This is an important opportunity for thought leaders across our state to get together, to share ideas, and to have important conversations. But my goal in this conference is to turn these conversations into action. And that's what I was thinking about as I prepared these welcome remarks. One of the things that motivates me more than anything are the children of the state of Michigan. During the month of March, the Lieutenant Governor, Garland Gilchrist, who's here in the front row, and I traveled the state and engaged with kids all across the state. 20 different schools we went to in order to read with children and reinforce how important literacy is and practicing reading. From our test scores to the teacher shortage to decrepit buildings, we know that years of disinvestment in the education of our kids has done undeniable damage to our education system in Michigan.
All right, so roads and education, obviously I think she's looking for some of that momentum of the bipartisan auto insurance reform to be able to start to push into the, all right, what about my gas tax?
Well, I mean, that's going to be tougher, I think, than No Fault was, because again, we started out talking about Dan Gilbert. He was instrumental in getting this deal done, because he told him, get it done or I'm going to do it. And that moved the negotiation process way ahead, and it caused her to drop some of her demands, like tying it to a road tax and tying it to the budget. Now she's got to negotiate them on their own merit. I think that's going to be a tougher job for her.
What are you hearing?
So, I mean, I think part of the strategy is you give in on auto insurance, you give up some of the things that you wanted in order to get a deal done, and you hope that you get some good faith coming back your way for these other conversations. Now, other governors have done that with the legislature in recent years, and they've sort of been bitten in the rear for doing it. Rick Snyder was unable to pull that off with a couple of things that he wanted. Jennifer Granholm never was able to figure out that relationship. So I think for Governor Whitmer, this is that first test. If you give them something that they want, will they play ball on some of the things that you want? And I don't know, I think she is more adept at the relationship with the legislature than either of the past two governors. She knows more about the legislature than the others. Maybe she is aware of something that the rest of us aren't. I always want to hold that possibility out there that will unlodge the talks over roads in particular. But she's got a lot of risk there in terms of that major piece of her early agenda maybe not coming together.
What do you make of her role here, Nolan, in terms of her leadership now, and kind of looking at past conferences when you had Governor Snyder taking such a prominent figure at the conference, and her kind of now moving into that role?
Well, I mean, remember, this is a business conference, and Rick Snyder was a businessman. So there was this feeling when he first came here of one of ours is in charge.
Right?
There's still a lot of uncertainty about which direction Gretchen Whitmer is going to go, and whether she's going to sustain some of those policies, many of which were hashed out here, those business-friendly policies that Rick Snyder put in place. And, you know, I think there's a lot of optimism that she will, but there's uncertainty. It's a concern.
What do you think?
I think her signing this auto reform bill up here, making a big play of that, is a way of sort of owning the conference in that initial way that you have seen governors in the past try to do. If she can get a roads deal by the end of the week, that will make her, as successful.
By the end of the week? Well, you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, just a little optimism there, sprinkle on everything. But that would make her as successful in her first Mackinac as Rick Snyder was when he was here. It's possible. I think she's moving in that direction. The question is how far she can get the legislature to move with her, and how much more she'll have to give up.
Well, Shirkey and Chatfield, the Senate Majority Leader and House Speaker, will be here.
Yes.
They're on the island.
They all canceled session this week so that they could be here all week.
They'll have plenty of time to meet with the governor and also meet with policy influencers. And that's the importance of this conference. You have a lot of people who influence policy and have leverage with the policymakers.
I was just going to say a little bit of leaning from the business community and saying, look, if you
hurt.
want to be able to maintain or fix the infrastructure, get businesses to want to invest here in Michigan, you've got to make sure that these roads are fixed.
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about education, not only K-12 in the state of Michigan, but also there's focus on Detroit and DPS. Dr. Nikolai Vitti is in the job for 2 years. I had a chance to talk to him earlier about how he thinks things have gone so far.
Well, I think we're in a good point. So at least through mid-year data, which obviously we'll know by the end of this school year, but literacy proficiency is up, so more students are at grade level in reading, more students are at grade level on math. We've reduced our chronic absenteeism by about 7 percentage points. We started with 275 vacancies 2 years ago. We're down to 120. We've hired over 70 music and art teachers. So I think in a lot of those areas we're starting to see improvement. We have to wait till the state results are released based on MSTEP. But all of our data is indicating that we're going to have a year of improvement after implementing a lot of that second full year of reform.
Talk a little bit about chronic absenteeism and the problem that it is with the district, which is a much higher average than it is in the state, and some of the different ways that you've been combating that.
Well, this year we funded an attendance agent at every school. So this individual, we created clear dashboards to know what students are on the verge of being chronically absent. And this attendance agent is empowered to do home visits. So they go directly to the home, ask questions about why the child is missing school. We'll even take students back to school. with them. And so we've seen some schools improve their attendance by 30 percentage points because of this attendance agent. And then with the data tracking system, we're just better to know who's absent and who's not absent. In addition to that, we've funded a dean of discipline in every school. So this dean is working with students that are often showing the greatest behavioral issues. So we're creating more one-on-one relationships between the student and this dean and the parents.
Not as many expulsions or suspensions.
And that's right. And that's the other thing that's contributing to improving attendance is a reduction in out-of-school suspensions, where we still have consequences for behavior, but more in-school suspension rather than out-of-school suspension. So that's helping our attendance as well.
A couple things that people are really looking at is the facilities. Obviously, you've got poor conditions at a significant percentage of buildings. How many would you say?
So we have 100 school buildings, and the quality of those buildings vary. Some were built over the last 10 years. Some are 100 years old. Right. So we did a facility review so we could have a third-party analysis of what the problem was. That third-party analysis indicated that right now we're looking at $500 million that would be needed to bring all those schools to 2020 educational facility standards, and that increases to $1.4 billion with deferred maintenance over the next 4 years. So we're starting to engage the business community. DTE has stepped forward to say they want to be a part of that solution. GM, Quicken are stepping forward. So the next step for us is to engage a larger community by feeder pattern so the community knows what the challenges are, and we can have real conversations about, in some areas, downsizing, in some areas, replacing 3 schools maybe with a brand new school. So that number will be revised, and then from that point, we have to have our debt secured beyond what it's able to be secured at this point, and possibly looking at a bond. But this would be a way to address the needs over the long term, no longer looking at this as a quick fix type of solution, and instead to create a holistic solution to a set of schools that children deserve.
You're talking engaging the business community and being able to help out there too. What about legislators in terms of maybe changing the formula of how you're able to get funds to deal with your facilities?
Yeah, it's a great point. On the one hand, the debt that was restructured isn't even addressing the solution in any way, because our budget doesn't generate any dollars specifically for facilities. The greatest root cause of this is the fact that other school districts generate more wealth or revenue because of property taxes. And so, for instance, Farmington, Southfield, and Grosse Pointe generate $130 million more per year than Detroit does. So they use those funds for higher teacher salaries and better facilities. So if we're ever going to get a point to creating equity across the state, we have to deal with the inequity that is occurring because of local property taxes.
A couple of issues he has on his hands. I mean, they're negotiating a teacher contract right now, but also looking at the facilities issue, the problems with a lot of the buildings that are in poor condition, where they're going to be able to get the money from that, if there's going to be any kind of structural change, and how they can get that money.
Yeah, that's a big question. I think until we get the tax base fixed in Detroit, the schools are going to continue to struggle. There's a lot of need, not a whole lot of resources. Governor Snyder did erase most of their debt to give them more operating funds, but it never seems to be enough to quite get them where do they need to be in terms of financial stability.
And be able to borrow the money. I mean, they're capped to be able to do for the facilities.
Yeah, facilities is all handled separately financially than operations. You have problems on both ends, though, in Detroit schools. There's not enough money to keep the buildings in good shape or to fix the ones that are broken, and there is not enough money to operate this district at a level that will provide the kind of educational opportunities we want for city students. It is still too small for its physical size in terms of the number of students versus the facilities it has, but right-sizing it is not terribly possible because of the geographic spread of the city and things like that. We have to start thinking about different ways to fund education, not just in Detroit, but in this state. We've been saying this for a really long time. But the way we do this, the dependency on your local tax base for education is inherently backward. And most states have moved away from at least most of their funding being determined that way, and we've just been unable to have even the conversation about changing that here.
I'm always curious, Nolan, how business leaders perceive Dr. Vitti when he comes up here and he's able to talk about pushing DPS forward and what he needs from them.
Well, you know, these are people who have been tapped over and over and over again by Governor Snyder, by Governor Granholm, by Governor England, over and over to contribute to Detroit schools' comeback. And over they've lost that investment. I don't think there's a huge appetite by the business community to get heavily involved in rescuing Detroit schools without a really concrete plan, specific mission they can agree to. I know the business group that Jerry Anderson of DTE is leading, is looking for ways to engage in education in the city, but in terms of one big overall business community effort to save the schools, I don't think you're going to see it.
You know, go ahead.
I don't think it's their responsibility. I mean, I really don't. That is the responsibility of the people of this state through their government to make sure that there is an adequate and fully funded decent educational system in every district in the state. We are failing in that regard. Business is not failing in that regard because that is not their job. It would be great to have business help out and invest in some real opportunities that enhance the public schools in Detroit and other places. But we have to figure out how to get more money in there.
Business Leaders of Michigan is leading this effort with the school unions, with other groups.
Trying to get
this
people to do
Launch
that.
Michigan effort to sort of push reform policy.
Okay,
Not
reform,
necessarily
yes.
to put money in, but to push reform policy.
Because I think that's the next step and where we need. Because we can talk about Detroit all day long, but some of the issues that plague Detroit public schools are plaguing other districts around the state.
Sure.
And when you take a look at K-12 education and where our numbers are lying, and we've talked about this so many times before, and it's been a topic of conversation up at the Mackinac Policy
Endlessly.
Conference. Yeah. But are we seeing when you say people that can influence policy, are we seeing business groups and other leadership groups saying, all right, now is the time where we need to change policy, or we need to change the way things are structurally set up so we can have a more successful education system in the state?
I think on the former, yes. On the latter, no.
Yeah.
They're talking about all these. This is the second time Jeb Bush has been up here telling us what he did in Florida, and he'll speak again tomorrow. And the first time he came up, everybody said, those are great ideas. Never got done. We've got a structural barrier in Michigan, this bifurcated accountability system. The governor is partly responsible, elected school board is partly responsible, and nothing compels them to work together. Until that responsibility is unified, we're not moving ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have got to have this rethink of education funding in the state. One of the things that they did in Florida was change the way that they fund schools. One of the things they've done in Tennessee, certainly in Massachusetts, which is the leader and should be the blueprint for us, they have gotten away from the archaic way in which we fund schools. You've got to start talking about it.
All right, well, it's something that we're going to be talking about over the next couple of days, and of course, months to come. All right, thanks, guys. Well, you know, a trip up to Mackinac Island wouldn't be complete without the guys from Under the Radar, Michigan.
Hey everybody, it's me, Tom Dalton from Under the Radar on PBS TV. You know, when it comes to history and pure grandeur, the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island is a world-class destination. And if I might add, a pretty sweet place. And speaking of adding sweets, the Grand has just completed the addition of 4 incredible cupola suites high atop the hotel. And to make sure mine was ready, I checked in, as it were, with the one and only Bob Taggart's. So Bob, is it true that they call these the cupola suites because Francis Ford Coppola actually designed them?
Francis Ford Coppola, you are amazing. I don't know where you went to school, but it was brilliant actually. No, cupola suites because we have a cupola up on top of the hotel. Yeah. That was originally a lookout, and we turned it into a 2-story bar. But originally the hotel had dormer rooms, and the dorm rooms originally were for employees. They lived up there, and when we overbooked, which we loved doing, we kicked them out. And we put guests up there, and guests loved the view so much. In 1913, we got rid of all the dormers, and we built that bank of windows that you see, and got rid of the dormers altogether. Over the years, adding rooms, we decided to put the dormers back.
So this brings the look of the building back to the way it looked originally.
As an historian, it is like the best thing that possibly happened. When you come up on the boat, the original 1887 look, hotel's a little longer. We were 426 feet long, now we're 660 feet long, but we got our dormers back.
Yeah, and people must be astonished when they stay there. I mean, the suites, from what I've seen pictures. They're pretty.
We have 397 rooms with the 4 new suites that we built, and every single one is different. And the dramatic interiors of these are just amazing.
Wow. Is my suite going to be ready soon?
Yep, I got one right near the kitchen. Can you hold a mop? You just, from here and then back and forth. Yeah, you're going to like your room there.
Thanks, Bob.
You're welcome.
So if you like sweets, treat yourself, because even though these sweets are chock full of history, they're pretty much calorie-free. Well, unless you order room service like I do. I eat a lot.
And that'll do it for us. You can see our live streaming coverage of the conference at DetroitPBS.org. I'm Christy McDonald. See you tomorrow from Mackinac Island.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. How does diversity bring energy to us all? At DTE Energy, we believe that it's the contributions of all that build great communities. As a company, we grow stronger by welcoming the unique perspectives of everyone. As community members, we support our state's broad culture and heritage. From working closely with women and minority-owned suppliers to embracing our local cultures, DTE Energy is powering diversity. The DTE Energy Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public Television.
And by the Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV, Business Leaders for Michigan, ITC Holdings, LLC, Michigan Technological University, W.K. Kellogg Foundation, and viewers like you. Thank you.